Laura Bennett's first conscious sensation was a mix of cold sterility and the vague discomfort of a body left untouched by movement for too long. Her hospital room was bathed in a stark white light that felt both oppressive and cleansing. She blinked slowly, the effort more daunting than she remembered it ever being. Her eyelids were like sandpaper against her dry, unfocused eyes. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, an unpleasant welcome back to consciousness. She tried to swallow, but her throat was parched, making the simple act feel like swallowing gravel. Her tongue felt glued to the roof of her mouth, thick and clumsy. With each slow, deliberate movement, Laura became painfully aware of the tubes and wires snaking from her arms and chest, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of her condition. A figure moved into her line of sight, a blur of white and blue that gradually sharpened into the concerned face of Dr. Jack Martin, her attending physician. He had a gentle demeanor that belied the seriousness of his profession. His gray hair was neatly combed back, and his deep-set eyes carried a warmth that seemed at odds with the coldness of the room. "Laura, you're awake. How do you feel?" His voice was soft, a deliberate attempt to soothe. Laura tried to respond, but her voice was a hoarse whisper, barely audible. "Thirsty," she managed to croak, the word scratchy and foreign to her own ears. Dr. Martin nodded, pressing a button on the wall that brought a nurse swiftly into the room. She carried a cup with a straw, and Laura sipped the water greedily, feeling the cool liquid trickle down her throat like a lifeline. It was an immense relief, grounding her back to reality. "Take it slow," Dr. Martin advised as he watched her closely, a clipboard in his hands. "You've been in a coma for nearly 3 months. There was a complication during your surgery, but you're stable now. Your recovery, however, will require time and rehabilitation." 3 months. The words didn't make sense to Laura. It was too much time lost to the void, too many moments slipped away into the darkness. She remembered the surgery, supposed to be routine, a blur of faces, and the echo of her own heartbeat in the sterile silence of the operating room. She remembered the reassurances of her husband, Mark, his promises that he would be there when she woke up. "Mark," she whispered, her voice gaining a little strength from the moisture. "Where is Mark?" Dr. Martin's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something Laura couldn't quite place. Hesitation, perhaps, or pity. It made her stomach clench with a new kind of fear. "He's been informed that you're awake," the doctor said carefully, avoiding her eyes as he made a note on his clipboard. "I'm sure he'll be here soon." The uncertainty in his voice was like a cold splash of reality. Laura felt a pang of something sharp and distressing. She wasn't sure what was worse, the physical frailty of her body or the growing realization that something was profoundly wrong. The day stretched on with a parade of nurses, each more cheerful than the last, trying to lighten the mood with small talk and smiles. Laura underwent a series of tests. Lights flashed in her eyes, reflex hammers tapped on her knees, questions asked that she found increasingly difficult to answer because her mind kept wandering back to Mark. Why hadn't he been there when she woke up? What was keeping him now? Her friend Emily arrived in the late afternoon, her face a mask of concern that crumbled into relief when she saw Laura awake. Emily's presence was a balm to her growing anxiety, but it also signaled that something was indeed very wrong. Emily was a terrible liar. Her eyes were too expressive. Her hands moved too much when she was nervous. "Emily, what is it? Where's Mark?" Laura asked, her voice stronger but trembling with a mix of dread and anger. Emily took a deep breath, her fingers twisting her wedding ring around and around. "Laura, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. Mark, he got married last month to someone else." The room spun around Laura, the beeping monitors, the white walls, Emily's stricken face, all swirling into a nauseating kaleidoscope of betrayal. Married. Someone else. The words echoed through the hollows of her mind, each repetition a hammer blow to her heart. "How? Why?" Laura's voice broke, tears spilling over, the saltiness a stark contrast to the bland hospital air. Emily reached out, taking Laura's hand in hers, grounding her as she had done so many times before in their long friendship. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I don't know all the details. I only found out because Rachel, the woman he married, she's a nurse here. I saw the marriage certificate filed in the hospital records." Laura's mind raced. Rachel. The name was vaguely familiar, a passing acquaintance, perhaps someone Mark mentioned in passing. The betrayal, the secrecy, the sheer audacity of it all, it felt like being submerged in ice-cold water, unable to breathe, unable to think. But as the initial shock wore off, replaced by a numbing coldness that seeped into her bones, Laura Bennett made a silent vow. She would not let this destroy her. She would find out why. She would understand how the man she loved, the man she trusted, could have turned her life into a lie. And then she would decide what to do about it. The path wasn't clear yet, but her resolve was. Laura Bennett was awake now, in more ways than one, and she would face whatever came next with her eyes wide open. Chapter 2: The Revelation. The silence that followed Emily's revelation felt suffocating, filling the hospital room with a tangible tension. Laura lay back against her pillows, the shock of Emily's words settling like a weight on her chest. The beeping of the monitors seemed louder now, each pulse a stark reminder of her vulnerability. "Married," Laura repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. "While I was here unconscious, fighting for my life, he married someone else." Emily nodded, her eyes brimming with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I didn't want to believe it either. I thought there had to be some mistake." Laura's mind spun with questions, each one a needle pricking at her heart. How could Mark do this to her? They had been married for over a decade, built a life together that she thought was solid and real. Now it felt as though the ground had been pulled from under her feet. "Tell me everything," Laura said, her voice firm despite the quiver of emotion. "Who is she? How did this happen?" Emily took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. "Her name is Rachel Parker. She's a nurse here in the administrative department. I think they met about 6 months ago. She was assigned to assist with some of the paperwork for your surgery." Laura clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. The betrayal stung all the more for its intimacy. This woman had been a part of the most critical moment of her life and had taken everything from her. "Does she know about me? About my condition?" Laura asked, her voice cold with barely suppressed anger. I'm not sure," Emily admitted, "but I can't imagine she doesn't. It's all in your medical files, and she has access to them." The room felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. Laura's breaths came quicker, her mind racing through the memories of the last year. The late nights Mark had started to work, the weekends he'd been away on business trips that now seemed suspiciously timed. Did anyone else know? Laura's question was a whisper, dreading the answer. "I don't know, Laura. I found out by accident, overhearing a conversation between two nurses. It wasn't public knowledge, but..." Emily trailed off, the implication hanging in the air. Laura felt a surge of resolve. She needed to know everything, no matter how painful. Knowledge was power, and she was not going to let herself be a victim any longer. "Thank you for telling me, Emily. I need to figure out what I'm going to do. But first, I need to know everything about this. About them," Laura said, her voice steadying with determination. Emily nodded, squeezing Laura's hand. "I'll help you, whatever you need. We'll find out everything." The following days were a blur of activity. Between her physical therapy sessions and the slow, painful process of regaining her strength, Laura and Emily began gathering information. They started with social media, digging through Mark's accounts and those of his new wife. The trail was not hard to follow. The digital footprints of their relationship were there, hidden in plain sight. Comments, likes, a timeline that told a story much older than Laura had been led to believe. Each new discovery was a blow, but Laura took them stoically. She documented everything, building a case not just for her lawyer, but for herself, to validate her feelings of betrayal and to outline the deception. Meanwhile, Emily tapped into her network of friends at the hospital. Bit by bit, they pieced together the timeline of Mark and Rachel's relationship. It became clear that Mark had been unfaithful long before Laura's surgery, his late nights and business trips aligning with times Rachel was off duty. Laura also insisted on meeting Rachel. She needed to confront the woman who had entered her life as a shadow and wrecked it. The meeting took place in a small coffee shop near the hospital, a public place where emotions could be kept in check. Rachel appeared nervous, her hands fidgeting with her coffee cup as Laura walked in. She was younger than Laura, with an earnest face that seemed at odds with the situation. "Why?" Laura asked, the question cutting through the hum of the coffee shop. Rachel sighed, her eyes meeting Laura's for a moment before dropping away. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she began, her voice low. "Mark told me he was separated, that his marriage was over in all but name. I believed him." The simplicity of the deception stung, the commonplace nature of the lie making it all the more painful. Laura listened silently as Rachel explained, the words doing little to ease the sense of betrayal, but giving Laura the pieces she needed to understand the full scope of Mark's deceit. As Laura left the coffee shop, the weight of her new reality settled on her shoulders. She was a woman scorned, yes, but also a woman empowered by the truth. Her next steps were clear. She would divorce Mark, take him to court for the betrayal and fraud, and rebuild her life on her terms. No longer in the dark, Laura Bennett was stepping back into the light, her path lit by the burning clarity of betrayal, but also by the promise of new beginnings. No matter how deep the wounds, she knew she would heal. She was, after all, awake now. Chapter 3: Gathering Storm. Laura Bennett spent her days following the revelation, weaving through a tangled web of emotions. The hospital, once a place of recovery, had become a battleground where she armed herself with determination and resolve. Each morning, as she awoke in the sterile, lonely room, her mission grew clearer. Uncover every lie, every deceit that Mark and Rachel had crafted. The days were filled with quiet, intense discussions with Emily, who proved an invaluable ally. Emily's familiarity with the hospital's staff and her ability to navigate its corridors without raising suspicion allowed her to gather whispered rumors and facts that painted a clearer picture of Mark's betrayal. Laura's first task was to secure her financial security, which Mark had managed throughout their marriage. She reached out to her bank, insisting on full access to their accounts and a detailed overview of recent transactions. Her request uncovered the first threads of financial mismanagement. Large withdrawals and transfers to unfamiliar accounts hinted at Mark funneling money to support his new life with Rachel. Each discovery fueled Laura's resolve, turning her initial shock into a sharp-edged need for justice. Equipped with this information, Laura arranged a meeting with Jonathan, her attorney. She laid out the evidence collected: bank statements, social media timelines, and Emily's notes from conversations with hospital staff. Jonathan listened, his expression growing grimmer with each document he reviewed. "This is more than just marital infidelity," Jonathan said, marking notes on his legal pad. "There's a clear trail of financial misconduct here, and possibly fraud. We can use this in your divorce proceedings and potentially in civil suits for damages." Laura nodded, feeling a cold satisfaction at having her suspicions validated. "I want everything out in the open," she declared. "He shouldn't get away with this." Jonathan agreed, suggesting they also hire a private investigator to dig deeper into Mark's financial dealings and his relationship with Rachel. The idea of spying on her estranged husband brought a complex mix of betrayal and vindication to Laura. Yet she knew it was necessary. Every piece of evidence would strengthen her position in court. The investigator was a middle-aged man named Carl, who came highly recommended for his discretion and efficiency. He met with Laura and Jonathan, taking notes and asking pointed questions that showed his understanding of the legal and personal ramifications of the case. "I'll get you everything you need to know," Carl assured her with a nod. "It's only a matter of time." As Carl worked in the shadows, Laura focused on her rehabilitation. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, but gave her a sense of progress that mirrored her emotional journey. Each step taken, each movement regained, felt like a metaphor for her path to recovery and independence. 2 weeks later, Carl returned with a report that exceeded Laura's grimmest predictions. Not only had Mark been funneling money into a secret account, but he had also been planning to buy a house with Rachel, a house funded by the savings he and Laura had accumulated over their marriage. The depth of Mark's treachery was breathtaking, and for a moment Laura felt the old wounds reopen, but she quickly sealed them with her newfound strength. She was no longer the woman who awoke in the hospital to a shattered world. She was a fighter, ready to reclaim her life and her dignity. With Carl's findings, Laura and Jonathan prepared for the upcoming legal battles. Divorce papers were filed, citing irreconcilable differences and financial misconduct. Laura insisted on full disclosure of assets and a freezing of their joint accounts to prevent any further siphoning of funds. As the court date approached, Laura felt a mounting tension, but also a clarity of purpose. She spent evenings poring over legal documents, familiarizing herself with legal terms and procedures. Jonathan coached her on what to expect in court, how to handle herself under questioning, and the importance of maintaining composure. The night before the first hearing, Laura sat alone in her now too quiet home, reviewing her notes. The house was filled with memories of a life that no longer existed, each room a reminder of a past that had been built on lies. But it also reminded her of what she was fighting for. Not just the dissolution of a fraudulent marriage, but the affirmation of her worth and her right to a future free of deceit. Determined, Laura packed a small bag with her documents, a symbol of her readiness to confront Mark and Rachel. She was no longer just a victim of their actions. She was the architect of her own resurgence. Tomorrow she would face Mark not as his deceived wife, but as a formidable opponent in court. This battle, born of betrayal, was not just about legal wins or financial settlements. It was about reclaiming her life and reshaping her destiny on her own terms. And Laura Bennett was ready to storm the courtroom with the full force of her newfound resolve. Chapter 4: Legal Boundaries. On the morning of the first court hearing, Laura Bennett stood before the courthouse, a formidable gray stone building that seemed to echo the weight of the decisions made within its walls. The chill in the air matched her resolve. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, she looked every part the assertive claimant she needed to be today. Beside her, Jonathan offered a reassuring smile as they ascended the steps together. Inside, the courtroom was a stark, intimidating space that smelled faintly of old wood and justice. Laura's heart thudded steadily in her chest as she took her seat, her eyes scanning for Mark and Rachel. She found them on the opposite side, looking equally prepared for the battle ahead. Mark's face was a mask of stoicism, while Rachel appeared uneasy, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and a moment later, the proceedings began. Jonathan was the first to present, laying out the case with precision. He detailed the emotional and financial betrayals, supported by the evidence of Mark's misconduct. He referenced the bank statements Carl had uncovered, the timelines of deception, and testimonies from hospital staff facilitated by Emily. As Jonathan spoke, Laura remained focused, her expression unreadable. She felt every eye in the room on her, judging, assessing, sympathizing. When it was Mark's turn to respond, his lawyer argued the narrative of a marriage long in decline, a relationship where both parties had emotionally checked out long before Laura's hospitalization. They painted Mark's actions as those of a man seeking companionship in a loveless marriage, an argument that made Laura's blood boil. Yet she held her composure. The judge listened intently, asking pointed questions that neither side could fully answer without conceding ground. It was a dance of legal arguments and moral judgments, with Laura and Mark's decades of shared life reduced to exhibits and legal briefs. After the hearing, as the court adjourned until the next session, Laura felt a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. She had faced Mark, had seen the man she once loved defend actions that were indefensible, and she had endured it with grace. Jonathan was pleased with how the day had gone, assuring her that the judge seemed receptive to their arguments. Over the next few weeks, as the divorce proceedings dragged on, Laura threw herself into her recovery and legal preparation with equal fervor. She attended therapy sessions, both physical and psychological, to rebuild her strength and address the betrayal's emotional scars. Each session helped her understand that while the legal battle might dictate her financial future, her personal healing was up to her alone. She also met regularly with Jonathan to refine their legal strategy. They pored over Mark and Rachel's financial disclosures, uncovering further inconsistencies and questionable transactions. With each discovery, Laura's sense of injustice deepened, but so did her empowerment. She was no longer reacting to Mark's actions, she was anticipating them, countering them with her legal maneuvers. One afternoon, Laura received a call from Carl with an update that would shift the dynamic of the case. He had traced the mysterious transactions to a luxury apartment purchase, the down payment for which had been made just days after Laura's surgery. The apartment was intended for Mark and Rachel, a clear indication of premeditated deceit. Armed with this new evidence, Laura and Jonathan prepared for the final hearing. They met the night before in Jonathan's office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and legal books, to discuss their closing arguments. The room was thick with the gravity of what was at stake, but Laura felt ready. She knew the facts were on her side, and more importantly, she knew her worth was not defined by the outcome of the next day. As Jonathan outlined the key points of their argument, Laura felt a deep sense of gratitude for her lawyer's dedication. He was more than her legal representative. He had become her advocate, her confidant, and a crucial part of her support system. That night, Laura lay in bed, the darkness around her filled with the echoes of the past months. She thought about the journey she had undertaken, from the depths of betrayal to the cusp of reclaiming her life. Tomorrow's court decision would mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As sleep finally came, Laura Bennett felt a profound peace. She had navigated the storm of her darkest days with resilience. No matter what the judge decided, she knew she would walk out of the courthouse stronger, her dignity intact and her future hers to shape. On a crisp morning, Laura Bennett stepped into the small, unassuming coffee shop where she had agreed to meet Rachel. Her heart was pounding with a mix of dread and determination. This was the woman who had entered her life as a shadow, turning it upside down. Laura needed to face Rachel, not out of vengeance, but to seek closure from the person who had been at the center of her husband's betrayal. As she pushed open the door, the familiar jingle of the bell announced her arrival. The coffee shop was quaint, with a cozy ambiance that belied the tension Laura carried. She spotted Rachel sitting at a corner table, her posture tense, her hands wrapped tightly around a coffee cup as if seeking warmth. Laura approached with measured steps, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She pulled out the chair across from Rachel and sat down without a word. The initial silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken accusations and regrets. Rachel was the first to break the silence, her voice a soft tremor. "Laura, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." Laura studied Rachel's face, searching for any sign of deceit. "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Rachel. Why? Why did you do it?" Rachel sighed, her eyes downcast. "I was led to believe that your marriage was over, that Mark and you were separated. He told me you had both moved on emotionally long ago." Laura's hands clenched into fists under the table. The lie stung, but it was a sting she had anticipated. And you just believed him without ever reaching out to me, without even considering the repercussions of your actions? Rachel's face was a mix of guilt and defensiveness. I wanted to believe him. Maybe because it was convenient, maybe because I was lonely. It's no excuse. I realize now how selfish that was. Laura took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. This was not just about venting anger, it was about understanding, about piecing together the fragments of her broken life. Did you ever consider the pain you would cause? Rachel nodded, her eyes moist with tears. I do now. I didn't fully understand then. I was wrong, Laura. I'm so deeply sorry. The apology was there, but it did little to soothe Laura's wounded heart. Yet, hearing Rachel acknowledge her fault gave Laura a small measure of solace. It was one step toward the closure she desperately sought. I need to know everything, Rachel. From the beginning, Laura said, her voice firmer now, demanding honesty. Rachel hesitated, then began recounting the story of how she and Mark had met at the hospital, the slow progression of their relationship, and how Mark had convinced her of his emotional separation from Laura. As Rachel spoke, Laura listened intently, absorbing every word, analyzing every confession. It was a narrative filled with deception and misguided emotions, a narrative that had drastically altered Laura's life. When Rachel finished, Laura remained silent for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. The coffee shop around them buzzed with the chatter of other patrons, a stark contrast to the serious, intimate conversation at their table. Finally, Laura spoke, her voice calmer but still laced with undeniable hurt. What you did, what both of you did, changed my life. It broke me in ways I'm still trying to understand. But I'm here today, not for vengeance, but for closure. I needed to hear the truth from you, to see the person who had such an impact on my life. Rachel wiped away a tear, nodding. I understand if you can never forgive me, Laura. I just hope one day you can find it in your heart, too. Laura cut her off, shaking her head slightly. Forgiveness is a journey, Rachel. Today I came here for closure, not absolution. You have your path to walk, and I have mine. With those final words, Laura stood up, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. The meeting had not healed all wounds, but it had provided her with the understanding necessary to move forward. As Laura walked out of the coffee shop, the cool air greeted her like a gentle balm. She felt a clarity she hadn't experienced in months. The path ahead would be difficult, strewn with the remnants of her past life, but she was ready to face it. Today marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, this time on her terms. Chapter 6, Rebuilding. As Laura Bennett left the coffee shop, the cold air seemed to echo the clarity she now felt inside. The confrontation with Rachel had not been easy, but it was a necessary step in her journey of healing and self-discovery. Now, as she walked the busy city streets, she was acutely aware of the sense of purpose steadying her steps. The path to recovery, both physical and emotional, lay stretched out before her, demanding yet promising. Laura's days began to take on a new rhythm, marked by her relentless pursuit of self-improvement and closure. Physical therapy sessions became her battleground, where she fought to reclaim the strength her body had lost during those long months in the hospital. Each small victory in the therapy room, a few more steps without support, a little less pain with each movement, felt like a triumph. But the physical battles were only part of her struggle. The emotional scars left by the betrayal were deeper and more intricate. Laura knew she needed professional help to navigate these turbulent waters. She started seeing a therapist, Dr. Helen Carter, whose expertise in dealing with trauma and betrayal came highly recommended. Dr. Carter's office was a sanctuary of calm amidst the chaos of Laura's world. During their sessions, Laura explored the gamut of her emotions: anger, sorrow, disbelief, and slowly acceptance. Dr. Carter encouraged her to articulate her feelings, to confront them rather than suppress them. Healing begins when we acknowledge our pain, Dr. Carter would say, her voice both gentle and firm. One of the pivotal moments in therapy came when Laura was asked to write a letter to Mark, not to send, but to express all that she wished she could say to him. The exercise was grueling yet cathartic. As she poured her feelings onto paper, Laura felt as though each word helped to lighten the load she carried. It was an outpouring of everything unsaid, every tear shed in silence, every moment of despair turned into determination. Outside of therapy, Laura leaned heavily on her network of friends and family, drawing strength from their support. Emily remained a steadfast presence, accompanying Laura to doctor's appointments and bringing lightness to her days with simple acts of kindness, like bringing over meals when Laura was too exhausted to cook, or simply listening when Laura needed to talk. Rebuilding her life also meant redefining her identity, which had been so closely tied to her marriage and her role as Mark's wife. Laura began to rediscover her interests and passions, things she had set aside during her marriage. She took up painting, something she had always enjoyed but never pursued seriously. The blank canvas was intimidating at first, a stark reminder of the new beginning she faced. But with each stroke, she found a new way to express her emotions, her fears, and her hopes. It was during one of her painting sessions that Laura decided to redesign her living space. Her home still held too many memories of Mark, of their life together. Transforming her home became a metaphor for her life's transformation. She repainted walls, changed furniture, and hung her paintings, each change a step toward making the space truly her own. As months turned into a year, Laura could feel herself growing stronger, more centered. She had faced the darkest parts of her betrayal and was slowly emerging into a new light. The legal battles with Mark had concluded, with Laura winning a satisfactory settlement and the validation that she had been wronged. But more importantly, she had won back her sense of self-worth and her ability to trust in her resilience. The anniversary of her awakening from the coma approached, and Laura decided to mark it not with resentment for the past, but with a celebration of the new life she had built. She organized a small gathering at her newly redecorated home, inviting those who had stood by her through her darkest times. As her guests filled her home with laughter and warmth, Laura looked around at the faces of friends and family, feeling a profound gratitude. The journey had not been easy, and she knew there would be difficult days ahead, but she also knew she possessed the strength to face them. Her life was once again her own, built from the ruins of betrayal into a testament to her courage and her unwavering spirit to rebuild and renew. Chapter 7: New Beginnings. Laura Bennett stood at the threshold of the art gallery, the warm light spilling out onto the sidewalk, contrasting with the cool dusk settling over the city. She adjusted her scarf, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The gallery was bustling with an eclectic mix of people, each absorbed in the vibrant displays of art that adorned the walls. Laura felt a flutter of excitement, a feeling that had become both familiar and cherished over the past months, as she rediscovered parts of herself that had been long buried under the weight of her former life. Tonight was significant, not just for the gallery opening, but for Laura herself. It was here, amid the swirl of colors and the hum of soft music, that she had chosen to publicly debut her own artwork, a series of abstract paintings that represented her journey through pain, betrayal, and healing. Each piece was a splash of her innermost feelings, transformed from private emotion into public expression. As she navigated through the crowd, Laura's eyes caught sight of Tom, the art curator she had recently started dating. His presence in her life was unexpected, a serendipitous result of her newfound willingness to open up to new experiences. Tom stood by one of her paintings, talking animatedly with a couple of patrons. Seeing him there, so engaged and supportive, filled Laura with a sense of warmth. "Your work is truly captivating," Tom said as he noticed her approach, his eyes lighting up with admiration not just for her art, but for her as well. "It resonates with so many here tonight." Laura smiled, appreciating his words. "Thank you, Tom. It feels good to share a part of myself like this. The evening progressed with lively discussions about art and life. Laura found herself more and more at ease. The gallery was a crucible of creativity and acceptance, where her past pains were not a scarlet letter, but a badge of courage. She talked about her work, explaining the emotions and stories behind each piece. The engagement was genuine, the feedback positive, further affirming her decision to put her personal evolution on display. As the crowd thinned out, Laura and Tom found a quiet corner. "I'm really proud of you," Tom said, his gaze sincere. "You've turned your trials into something beautiful, something that speaks not just to you, but to everyone who sees it." "It's been quite the journey," Laura admitted, "but I couldn't have done it without support from people like you." Their conversation drifted to plans for the future. Laura shared her ideas for new projects and her hopes for continuing her involvement in the art community. Tom listened intently, his interest genuine, making suggestions and offering to connect her with other artists and opportunities. Later, as they walked out of the gallery together, the city lights twinkling in the early night, Laura felt a contentment she hadn't known in years. The evening was not just a celebration of her art, it was a celebration of her life's new direction. She was no longer defined by her past, by what had been done to her, but by what she had chosen to create from her experiences. Back at her apartment, Laura stood by her window looking out over the city. The buildings, with their countless lights, seemed to mirror the stars above, distant yet bright. She thought about the future, about the uncertainty and potential it held. There was a time when such thoughts would have filled her with fear, but now they sparked a thrilling sense of possibility. She thought about her relationship with Tom. It was still new, still fragile in some ways, but it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared interests. It was a far cry from the life she had lived with Mark, where her own desires and aspirations had often been overshadowed by his. Laura knew challenges lay ahead. There would be days when the shadows of her past would feel overwhelming, when the doubt would creep in again. But she also knew she had the tools to face them, the strength to overcome them, and the support of people who cared about her. She turned away from the window, her reflection fading as she moved back into the warmth of her apartment. There, surrounded by her art, by the tangible results of her resilience, Laura felt ready for whatever came next. She had faced the deepest betrayals, and from them, she had crafted a new life, one marked by self-expression, new love, and a rekindled passion for living fully. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she would meet them with the same courage and creativity that had brought her this far. Chapter 8, Full Circle. The soft chime of the wind chimes on her balcony greeted Laura Bennett as she stepped outside with a cup of coffee in hand. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from her small garden. It was the day she marked 1 year since her awakening from the coma, a day she now considered her second birthday, a rebirth into a life of authenticity and self-discovery. As she sat down, Laura reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. From the devastating betrayal to her courageous confrontation and the healing that followed, each moment had sculpted her into the person she was today. Her eyes wandered over the skyline of the city, a landscape that had witnessed her lowest lows and now her triumphant highs. Her phone buzzed gently beside her, a message from Emily popping up on the screen. It was a reminder about the small celebration they had planned for the evening. Laura smiled, feeling grateful for Emily's unwavering support throughout everything. Her friends had become her chosen family, their bonds strengthened by the trials they had faced together. The day was busy with preparations. Laura enjoyed these moments, organizing, decorating, and setting up her home for the gathering. It wasn't just about celebrating her survival. It was about celebrating her life's new direction and the people who made it richer. As guests began to arrive, Laura welcomed each one with genuine warmth. The atmosphere was light and joyful, filled with laughter and good conversation. The room was adorned with her artwork, each piece a topic of admiration and discussion. It wasn't just the visual appeal that captured the guests' interest, but the stories behind each painting, stories of resilience and hope. Tom was among the guests, mingling and sharing his insights on art and life. His presence in Laura's life had become a source of joy and stability. Watching him interact with her friends, Laura felt a profound sense of peace. She knew the road ahead would have its bumps, but she also knew she had found a partner who respected and supported her wholly. As the evening progressed, Laura took a moment to stand back and observe the scene before her. The people in her apartment were a vibrant tapestry of her new life. Each one had played a part in her healing, offering a shoulder to cry on, a joke to laugh at, or wisdom when she felt lost. It was a community built not just on shared history, but on shared strength and mutual respect. Later, Laura raised a glass to make a toast. "A year ago today, I woke up from a darkness that I thought might swallow me whole," she began, her voice steady and clear. "But darkness is just the absence of light, and each one of you brought light back into my life. For that, I am eternally grateful. Here's to the light, and to new beginnings, no matter when they come." The room erupted in cheers and applause, and as the glasses clinked, Laura felt her heart swell with love and gratitude. It was a feeling she wanted to hold on to, a reminder of how far she had come and how much she had grown. The party wound down in the late hours of the night, and as the last guest left, Laura stood by her window once more, looking out at the city that never sleeps. The twinkling lights mirrored the stars above, a beautiful, serene view that filled her with hope. She thought about her future, about the book she planned to write, detailing her journey from betrayal to healing, hoping it might inspire others facing their darkness. She thought about the art shows Tom was helping her organize, about the possibility of teaching art therapy to others who had gone through trauma. With a deep, contented sigh, Laura turned from the window. She picked up her sketch pad, a tool that had once been a means of escape, but now served as a bridge to her future. As she began to draw, her strokes were confident and purposeful. She was no longer a woman marked by what had been done to her, but defined by what she had done for herself. Tomorrow was another day, another step in her ever-evolving journey. But tonight, Laura Bennett went to bed with a smile, secure in the knowledge that she had not only survived, but thrived, turning her trials into a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit.